The Whippoorwill in the Mist by Jon Crawford. Narrated by Otis Jiry. This is where I left the army, out in the darkness, out in the mist. As I pulled into the small dirt parking lot that marked the end of County Road 7, the headlights of the new Impala my father bought me as a graduation present held the darkness of the fresh Mississippi summer night at bay. The song on the car radio ended, and the rich baritone voice of the disc jockey announced that the previous song had been Walk Like a Man by the Four Seasons. He then quickly transitioned into the latest developments that were coming out of Vietnam. I began to check my hair and the red bow tie of my tuxedo at the rearview mirror to ensure everything was perfect. It was prom night after all, and my special girl had been waiting in the shade of the wide old oak, alone since sunset. She would always wait for me now. She would never leave, and I loved her for that. The aching in my hands was a dull, constant reminder of our argument that afternoon. Sometimes Amy made me mad, and I'd lose control of myself, but she always forgave me after. She knew I couldn't help it. For the life of me, I couldn't remember what we had argued about earlier. Something about going to the prom with Bobby Dixon. Something silly like that. Amy liked to press my buttons, liked it a lot, in fact. And when I put my hands around her throat and she saw how serious I was and calmed down quickly, she even decided to lie down under our old oak. I told her I was sorry if I had hurt her, and even though she didn't answer me after we made love under a sky scarred with pink and golden tangerine hues left by a sun that was slowly dying behind the horizon, somewhere a whippoorwill began to sing, and I knew she forgave me. She looked peaceful, lying there in the wild flowers under the last light of the day, in her new white prom dress, like an angel. I reached for the glove box, my hand blindly fumbling through the clutter, until it found the corsage I had left Amy to pick up. I had ordered the corsage special the week before, a white oleander to match her prom dress. I examined it now thoughtfully, like an archaeologist who has discovered a lost relic from a forgotten world. I took a deep breath and one last look in the rearview mirror before opening the door and stepping out into the still of the night. The moon was full and pale and cast a ghastly silver light across the landscape of the field, making the old oak where Amy waited look like a shadowy sentinel waiting in the night. A dark omen silhouetted against the ethereal light of the full moon. A shiver went up my spine. Maybe it was the sight of how something so beautiful in the day could look so dangerous and foreboding in the darkness. Or perhaps it was just the coolness of the night in contrast to the heat of the day. It got that way sometimes in Mississippi. Hot June days fell into cool nights that produced a mist that clung to the ground and lingered in the cornfields and wild patches along the back roads. Sometimes it even breached out over the line that separated road from field like an invading spectral army rapidly claiming territory, a kind of liquid smoke flooding the landscape. The old-timers that hung around the Red Rooster Saloon said it was a bad omen when the mist seemed to come alive under a moon that was bright and full. They said that when the moon was ripe and the mist was moving, you could sometimes see the faces of the dead in it, and if you did happen to glimpse their faces, you would soon find yourself joining them in the mist. Tonight was like that, and as I stood beside my shiny new Impala, ribbons of the low-hanging fog slowly snaked their way through the golden brown wild glass like spectral fingers looking for something to grasp. I began to walk towards the field, leaving the door of the Impala open, so the interior lights would serve as a beacon for Amy and I to find our way back to the car in the dark. so we could find our way back to the light. The car radio sounded hollow and eerie against the silence of the summer night that was usually so full of the symphonies that crickets and other nocturnal insects produced. I stepped off the road and began to walk toward the ominous watchman that was our oak tree. The mist washed over my ankles like small waves on a beach. As I waded deeper into its dead waters, it took me in as one of its own. I was getting closer to the oak now, closer to Amy. I looked back at my new Impala. The voice on the radio sounded disembodied and strange from this far out, like it was on the other side of a velvet curtain. The car itself looked further away than it should have, a small island of light alone in an ocean of darkness. Suddenly, something in my mind screamed that Amy wasn't here anymore. Screamed at me to run back to the light before it was too late, before I lost to the darkness. I began to turn around towards the Impala, began to head back to the salvation and warmth that the light held within it. That's when I heard her. Amy's voice called to me. It was a harsh whisper that carried over the distant ghostly sound of the Impala's radio, like nightingale's wings passing through the night air. "I'm coming, Amy!" I shouted. My voice echoed as if I was at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. My pace quickened as I clumsily stumbled and tripped my way through the uncultivated ground that hid beneath the mist until I finally reached the old oak. I rounded the deep-rooted tree to where I left my love, and to my shock and horror, Amy was nowhere to be found. I began to panic, screaming her name like a drowning man trying to get the attention of someone on a distant shore. "Amy! Amy! Where are you, Amy?" My pulse raced, my heart pumped hot magma through my veins as it attempted to beat its way out of my chest. I fell to my knees as the world began to spin. "I'm over here, Michael." Her voice was soft and reassuring. I looked up at the love of my life. The fog had risen to a white wall that flanked and seemed to stop just behind where she stood. Her face was veiled in darkness. Her white prom dress blended gently into the churning mist and seemed to move in sync with it. Her head slumped to her left side limply. Her ear almost touched her shoulder. "I've been waiting for you, Michael. Come dance with me." I stumbled to my feet and was suddenly aware that the song that was now playing on the Impala's radio was Santo and Johnny's Sleepwalk. It was our song, and I knew for sure then that fate had put us together for this one perfect moment, and that we would stay together forever. I walked over to Amy. My head hung low in shame from hurting her earlier. I'm sorry about..." My stuttered apology was cut off by a chilled hand cupping my chin and gently lifting it until I looked into the glimmer of moonlight that reflected in her obsidian eyes like water at the bottom of a deep well. "Shh, it's okay, Michael. Won't you dance with me?" I could hear the longing in Amy's voice. It had hunger, a desire to be touched. I responded by putting my arms around her waist. She, in turn, put hers around my neck, resting her head on my shoulder, pressing close to me as we began to sway to the tempo of the song. Amy felt cold, so I held her even closer in an attempt to warm her, but instead of transferring heat, only the cold passed between us. An unnatural, icy chill that made my stomach turn and my skin prickle into goose flesh. I tried to separate from her as I felt Amy's cold lips press against my neck, but her grip was like a vice. She was frozen to me. Her arms around my neck were like a tightening noose. She softly whispered in my ear that we should always be together, and as the mist enveloped us, her dry teeth began their dark work on my neck. I smiled to myself, wrapped in the perfectness of the moment. The last light I would ever see faded from my vision, and somewhere, not so far away, a whippoorwill began to sing. I'd join Amy forever now, join her where I left her, in the darkness, in the mist.